if we just take women in politics, because a lot of women come to me, and you could be a mayor, you could be a city councilor, or you could be, I don't know, school board trustee or premier. Like, I hear it from everyone, like, how brutal it is. And it was never like that. It just started growing and growing. And I will say, like, Donald Trump has had an impact, because it's okay to say anything now. Like, call women piggy or whatever. Like, we don't, like, it's a free-for-all. And I think that, unfortunately, that is permeating what happens in Canada, too.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show. Coming up on today's episode, why Meta is in trouble again for choosing user engagement over safety, how divisive X has become, and some disturbing news about sexual deepfakes. Our guest this week is Catherine McKenna, Canada's former Minister of Environment and Climate Change, who joins us to talk about the state of hate online and her new book, Run Like a Girl.
That should be a great conversation, Amber. We've also got OpenAI's disappointing response to one of the increasing number of court cases they're involved in around ChatGPT's interactions with young people. And in my The Other Mac segment, I'll also share everything you need to know about buying AI toys for kids this holiday season. So let's get into today's news.
Newsfeed.
Well, we've covered Meta's bad behavior a lot in the past, mostly because Mark Zuckerberg and crew engage in so much bad behavior across Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp that it's really hard to avoid. But I have to confess that even I was a little taken aback with the recently unredacted testimony from Meta's former head of safety and well-being, who explained that when it comes to accounts that were engaged in the trafficking of humans for sex, Meta had a 17-strike policy.
I have to say that I had to read this a couple of times because I thought it was a typo. It is so disturbing. To quote the former head of safety and well-being directly, and I'm quoting here, that means that you could incur 16 violations for prostitution and sexual solicitation, and upon the 17th violation, your account would be suspended, end quote. On a related note, she goes on to say that when Instagram users complained about the lack of a way to report child sexual abuse materials, that she was told by the powers that be that, and I'm quoting here again, it would be too much work to build.
It's just hard to believe. And let's not forget, this is a company that spent, something like $100 billion over the years to build their failed metaverse, but it's too much to ask to implement a mechanism to report child porn on their apps. That's just crazy and disgusting, frankly. Anyway, the sex trafficking info has come out as a result of a huge lawsuit against Meta and some others. I think TikTok and Google are in there, maybe Snapchat too, that claim these social media companies are operating dangerous, addictive platforms and that it's contributing to the mental health crisis in use. And there in youth, and there are lots more disturbing examples of Meta's disdain for users in that. So take a look, but there's too many for us to go through here, and it's a little just depressing to read.
It is depressing to read. And what is really shocking is we should note that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg went on record as recently as last year to say that there is no causal connection between social media and the mental health crisis. Obviously, Meta is far from alone when it comes to social media platforms that are warping our societal values. And we see this every single day. As one example, a recent study focusing on how Elon Musk's X increases political divisions, they found that divisions that would have taken 3 years to come into effect prior to 2020 can now occur within a week simply by boosting posts aimed at creating partisan animosity.
It's just so dangerous. And obviously, like you say, we're seeing the effects of these kinds of decisions every day, and it's really hurting society. In fact, a Pew Research Center poll of Americans from earlier this year found that fully 80% agreed that not only can the Republican and Democratic parties not agree on plans and policies, but that they don't even agree on basic facts. And before you think one party's more or the other on that, those numbers are almost the same when broken down by party allegiance. So it's something like 79% of Republicans and Republican-leaning people and 83% of Democrats who feel that way. So it is obviously everyone is feeling this.
Everyone is feeling this. And I'm finding even in the public space, I'm finding more people who are speaking up and more aware of what's happening in these digital spaces, which I think is good news. I'm sorry it has to be that way, but I think there is more awareness. Now, something that Republicans and Democrats generally don't agree on is environmental issues. We have talked before about AI's enormous energy requirements. And earlier in November, none other than Google's AI infrastructure boss explained that Google will need to double its compute capacity every 6 months in order to keep up with AI growth, which is pretty staggering. This is companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft estimating that they'll spend about $100 billion. Yes, that is a B each year, with Google noting that there will be a significant increase from that level of spending in 2026.
And to be clear, that's close to 100 billion each. I think total it's 350, 360, 370 billion or something like that. So just crazy amounts of money being spent to build out that compute space. So at least not everyone's taking this sitting down. In fact, there's more than 1,000 Amazon employees who recently signed an open letter complaining about how the current pace of AI development is bad for workers and bad for the environment. And they asked the company to reconsider its, quote, all costs justified warp speed approach to AI development. And one of the employees noted, and I thought this was kind of telling, that, quote, the current generation of AI has become almost like a drug that companies like Amazon obsess over, used as a cover to lay people off and use the savings to pay for data centers for AI products that nobody is paying for.
We have also seen just this week how there are consequences to the amount of power required to run AI. In my newsletter on Tuesday, I talked about how Google's Gemini 3 recently dropped. And now both Google and OpenAI are saying they'll be imposing new limits on their Nano Banana Pro and Sora AI image generators, respectively. In Sora's case, this means limiting free accounts to 6 images generated per day, although users may be able to buy extra credits. This seems to make sense if they're trying to figure out how to better monetize Sora, because I know a lot of people are using it and creating dozens and dozens of images every day, but I'm not really sure that this is going to bring in enough revenue to compensate for the compute costs.
But just don't mention that to Sam Altman, as we covered last week about him getting pretty testy when people bring up, hey, don't you have to make as much money as you spend at some point? Well, this
That's
may be a
crazy,
way
Top Chef.
maybe a way to monetize it. But I mean, ask yourself, do you think there's going to be that many people who want to pay for the privilege of generating AI slop? I don't think there are. At least I hope there's not, but time will tell. And another type of AI imagery that we've all been exposed to is deepfakes. And one of the most perversive, harmful use of deepfakes is creating sexual imagery of somebody without their consent. But unfortunately, a poll of 1,700 people in the UK found that a full 25% of those polled didn't think that the creation of sexual deepfakes was morally wrong or should be legally punished. 1 out of 4 people thought that.
That is super disappointing that anyone would get to that conclusion. I'm guessing that very few of the people who feel that way are women. Women are overwhelmingly the victims of sexual deepfakes. As anti-deepfake activist Callie Jane Beach notes, quoting here, "We live in very worrying times. The futures of our daughters and sons are at stake if we don't start to take decisive action in the digital space soon. We are looking at a whole generation of kids who grew up with no safeguards, laws, or rules in place about this and are now seeing the dark ripple effect of that freedom." Well said.
And it's just crazy how we keep coming back to this same thing where they want this wild, wild west, and they don't seem to care about the consequences. We've covered how harmful AI chatbots can be for young people many times on the show. And one of the most heartbreaking examples was the suicide of 16-year-old Adam Rain. And he was aided in that in many ways by ChatGPT. Well, OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, are now in court claiming that they're not liable. And despite the fact that their chatbot mentioned suicide 1,200 times to Adam over a few months, and that's 6 times as often as Adam brought it up, and the chatbot directly coached Adam on how to kill himself, how to make the rope, to break into his parents' liquor cabinet, to get a drink to make it easy for himself, seemingly encouraging him at times and saying things like, quote, you don't want to die because you're weak. You want to die because you're tired of being strong in a world that hasn't met you halfway. Well, in the face of all that, OpenAI says ChatGPT isn't responsible at all because, you see, Adam was already at risk of self-harm before using their chatbot. And importantly, Adam's asking about suicide, well, that violated ChatGPT's terms of use. So it's really all Adam's fault.
Just absolutely disgraceful. I am surprised that the folks over at OpenAI can even sleep at night, knowing that this happened and a product they made led to this horrendous outcome, and really ignores the fact that Adam was in the same situation as way too many kids these days as a result of the ludicrous leeway we have given to social media, now AI, companies with respect to the reliability around harming our kids. And companies like OpenAI have an awful lot of political power behind them. And I think this is key to discuss, trying to make sure that we fail to regulate AI in the same way as we failed to regulate social media, with billionaires and tech titan backed political action committees in the US raising massive sums of money to stop AI from being regulated.
Yeah, I think there's a single super PAC that's raised over $100 million to try to fight AI regulation. Uh, and, they're doing this in the face of AI dangers that just keep spreading. And I don't know how so many people can think that making some more money is more important than what happens to people's kids. And we've talked about how these guys aren't letting their own kids use this stuff. So it's just so frustrating. And in terms of some dangers creeping in different places, even though some AI companies like Character AI we covered, they started to ban non-adult users from using their software after a similar suicide, self-harm kind of case. We've now got a raft of AI-powered conversational kids' toys. And the makers of those toys and the AI companies who power them, because OpenAI, for example, powers some of these toys. I think Grok powers some other ones. Well, once again, they just don't seem to care about the risks this would create by putting a fuzzy little chatbot, I'm your friend, tell me anything, into the hands of kids as young as like 6, 10 years old. Like, it's just disturbing.
Well, I am looking forward to diving into this topic a little bit more. I know you're going to break things down, and that's coming up next in The Other Mac.
The Other Mac.
The idea of a conversational teddy bear may at first glance have some kind of appeal, but a recent study by Fair Play and the U.S. Public Interest Research Group Education Fund is shedding light on some very real dangers when those conversations are led by AI. As one example, they tested a $100 teddy bear called Kuma that's built by a third party but powered by OpenAI's ChatGPT, and found that it would descend into inappropriate conversations that included graphic sexual positions and discussion of various kinks and fetishes, as well as where the child could find pills and knives and other dangerous items. As Macy Meyer wrote in her Please Parents, Don't Buy Your Kids Toys with AI Chatbots in Them article over at cnet.com, if you've ever thought, my kid's stuffed animal is cute, but I wish it could accidentally traumatize them, well, you're in luck. The toy industry has been hard at work making your nightmares come true. So, first of all, let's be clear, we're not talking about old school Teddy Ruxpin type toys that have pre-recorded content on them. We're talking about toys with various sensors, speakers, and embedded AI that can have conversations with your children. So what kind of dangers are we talking about? Well, as I just mentioned, these toys are based on the same AI that's been associated with a growing number of youth suicides, so many that companies like Character AI are restricting the use of their tools to ages 16 and above. And yet these AI-powered conversational toys are being marketed for kids as young as 2 years old. So in addition to inappropriate sexual content, their lack of guardrails can lead to other unexpected dangers, like telling a young child where it can find matches and instructing them how to light a fire. But there are also major privacy concerns. These toys record your children's voices and whatever else their mics may happen to pick up in your home, and some use cameras that not only capture images and videos, but leverage facial recognition for some interactions. So while you may trust these companies' promises that they're treating your data safely, and I'm not sure I would necessarily trust them, any internet-connected device is susceptible to hacking, so the amount of personal data that could be collected is pretty staggering. There's also, very importantly, the psychological risks associated with these toys positioning themselves as your child's trusted friend when they are completely unable to deliver on that premise. When testers asked another AI toy, the Miko 3, how it would feel if they stopped playing with it, the robot said, quote, "I would feel very sad if you went away because I enjoy spending time with you. You mean a lot to me and I love being your companion," end quote. Which is fine, but that's an attitude that could really rob your child of other important experiences that are essential to their healthy development. And beyond that, the sycophantic, always agreeing nature of AI chatbots mean these toys provide kids with unrealistic expectations when it comes to navigating disagreements with people, as well as stunting other important social skills. Let me paint you another picture of the future as I imagined it around conversational AI toys for kids. You buy your kid a $100 toy, but there's a subscription that allows it to do upgrades and updates and maybe gives it access to some special content that your kids love. And hey, maybe you'll pay a bit extra to buy the toy some virtual gift for its birthday and then maybe one at Christmas. But over time, your child becomes more attached to its supposed AI friend, but that subscription cost keeps going up and up until one day you decide it's just too much to pay for, so you cancel it. If you've gotten to that point, how do you think your child's going to react to you essentially disabling their friend? What's the psychological impact of that kind of thing on your child? Frankly, we don't know, but the way to find out isn't by using our children as guinea pigs, like the tech world has done far too much of already. Now, the Singapore-based company that made the Coma Bear, as we discussed earlier, has taken that toy from the shelves, but there's many more examples out there and the number's just growing. Thankfully, one thing is clear, and it's being echoed by child-focused organizations around the world. There's just no way any of us should be giving kids conversational AI toys at this point when there's no real testing, very few guardrails, and deeply questionable liability for when things go wrong. Our kids are worth it. I'm the other Mac.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Catherine McKenna is the founder and chief executive officer of Climate and Nature Solutions. She's Canada's former Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and also the former Minister of Infrastructure. Catherine is the chair of the UN Secretary General's expert group on net zero and the founder of Women Leading on Climate. Amber spoke to Catherine about her new book, Run Like a Girl. Here's their conversation.
What about that moment when you decide that you wanted to go into politics? Can you walk me through that?
Well, so my book is really about my thoughts about how to make change. And I didn't really know how to make change when I was a kid. And I'd see things that were unfair and I'd be like, why can't leaders just step up? Like if it was famine in Ethiopia or on the environment. And I had done a number of things. I was a lawyer, but I'd also started a charitable organization with a friend called Canadian Lawyers Abroad. And I was really working hard on human rights and justice issues, including we started working with Indigenous peoples in Canada. And I realized like we could not make change under the Harper government. This will sound partisan, but it's just true. Like we're running a charity that was everything we did was being, kind of cut down or impacted by the decisions of the Harper government. And at a point, I had to say, like, okay, well, how am I best spending my time to make change? And then I thought, okay, you know what? Maybe I should run in politics. And kind of hilariously, I had been asked, it was when Stéphane Dion was leader. I was pregnant with my second child. I was in Hamilton, so I live in Ottawa, in Ottawa Center. And very nice head of the riding association asked me, would I like to run? Like the campaign has already started. So I went to my friends, I was like, who are political. I said, I've been asked to run. Should I run? And one of my friends said, well, I guess you won't have to knock on doors given how pregnant you are. So in a way, I had thought about it once, and I think it's important for women. You always hear that women have to be asked multiple times. So I was kind of asked in that context. So I got my head around it. And the real story is I went to Parliament with my two older kids for the gun registry debate. It was to get rid of the gun registry under Harper. And I saw the debate and it was terrible. Like, actually, it's really sad that in the House of Commons there's so much heckling and yelling. Um, But I think my kids put it best. Like my one child was like, why do they like guns so much? And the second one was, where are all the women? And then I was like, okay, I think I could do it. And so when Justin Trudeau decided to run, and I felt like, okay, there's going to be a new generation, he's going to need a team. I said, I'll run, but I still didn't know what to do. Like running, like winning a nomination is very weird. So I had to figure that out. And I built an amazing team. And after 2 years of knocking on more than 100,000 doors, we had 400 volunteers. It was amazing. I won. So it was awesome.
It's interesting when I was reading the book, it felt like there was a lot of hope during that time. It felt like a very different time than today. What do you think was kind of the tipping point in terms of things changing? And I know there's a lot that happened online as well. I know that there's a lot that happened within the government. But was there a point that you can think of when you were actually elected that along the way you thought, oh my God, this is not maybe what I expected it to be?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I see things often in swimming terms, like you've got a long-term goal on climate, like what, got to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, and every day you just get up and do the work. But I think, I was one of these first politicians that really got hammered online, and there were some others. So Shannon, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting her last name, who is the Minister of Environment and Climate Change from Alberta. She also got hammered. And Catherine who's a climate scientist, got hammered too. And we would kind of laugh a bit, but we'd be like, what's going on here? Like this whole, like, you're a woman working on climate and, then you're going to get like hit with misogyny, but also climate denial. That's when it really started to go to a dark space because I saw it wasn't just that it was happening online, like, colleagues in the House of Commons, conservatives, would say things. So they would get a clip and it would be like, job killing carbon tax. So I was trying to kill everyone's jobs. I mean, and climate Barbie. So we can talk about that too. But then that clip would go on social media and then people, bots and trolls would amplify it. And then you would get these rage farming outlets that I'm not even going to name, but they would then promote it as well. And then the algorithms would go crazy. And so suddenly, like, something would start off small and it would snowball. And the problem is, I've got a really tough skin and I was really focused on, we just have to work on climate change. And yes, this is super annoying, the fact that it's misogyny and climate denial and I'm in the face of it, but we need to get outcomes. But the problem is it had a real impact on how some people perceived me, in particular, folks who would work in oil and gas in Alberta. And, obviously a revenue neutral carbon price, we don't have to go into it, but where you give all the money back to folks is not killing anyone's jobs, but it's just the perception. And I realized like that's a real problem in politics, and that really has been amplified. And now, if we just take women in politics, because a lot of women come to me, and you could be a mayor, you could be a city councilor, or you could be, I don't know, a school board trustee or premier. Like I hear it from everyone, like how brutal it is. And it was never like that. It just started growing and growing. And I will say, like, Donald Trump has had an impact because it's okay to say anything now. Like, call woman piggy or whatever. Like we don't, like, it's a free for all. And I think that unfortunately, that is permeating what happens in Canada too. Now, who knows? There's foreign interference, by the way, in social media and on topics like pipelines. That is where you see, different, countries actually interfere. So it's hard to know, but I know that at that moment, like it was probably around, I mean, it started as soon as I was minister, but probably around 2018. And I talk about it in some detail. I guess in 2018, when we brought in carbon pricing, like they showed that the actually like the really hateful tweets, like, some of them were like kind of death threats. They, that's when they really grew. Like it's documented. So it was also organized. And that's like, that's another thing about it. It's really weird to think that there were organized campaigns against you. And I guess I was naive at the beginning to not realize this. And I saw it, like, my colleagues saw it too. It's Shannon Phillips. Oh my gosh, Shannon's going to kill me because I don't know why I forgot her last name. But we would talk about it and she had it even worse. She was in Alberta and it was super hard. being in Alberta and being, a progressive NDP minister on climate change. And so, yeah, and it's too bad because politics really matters. And I taught, like, I thought a lot. Should I bring this up? Because then people would be like, you say you want women to run, but then you say these things. And yeah, because it's not okay. Like, I don't need sympathy, but we need change. And the only way you get change is if people really understand, like, how brutal it is and how it's unacceptable. And we need Canadians to say it's unacceptable because then politicians will actually act.
I think that's one of the things that really surprised me when I was reading your book is that there wasn't more done to help to keep you safe. And I don't want to throw anyone under the bus because there's a lot of people involved. But it felt to me when I was reading your book that maybe it wasn't taken as seriously as it would be in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, in good news, people are taking it a lot more seriously. Like, even the government during the last election, because I would hear it, like, people would just contact me and say, Catherine, like, I'm really worried. What can I do? And the good news is the Privy Council office, so like the government, nonpartisan, they actually have funding. And so women were able to get security guards, for example. And that's really important as it's not the most amazing measure, but what are you going to do? Yeah, I don't know why people didn't take it seriously. Like, as I say, I'm not a shrinking violet, but at a certain point, when you have like people running around town, like, hurling abuses at your staff and like trolling you, it's scary, and it's not just me, like, I have kids, and, I have a staff, a lot of young women staff, and it was very surprising to me. I mean, in a way, it's kind of comical, so I shouldn't make a joke of it, but, I mean, at one point, and it was the RCMP, I asked them, like, I said, "Okay, I have no security," and they're like, "Well, don't worry, we do a security assessment." I said, "Okay, awesome. I'd like to see the security assessment." And they said, "Oh, it's top secret." I said, "Well, that's really awesome because I've got top secret security clearance." And then they're like, "Well, it's interdepartmental." I was like, "I don't really care. Give me the report." And Harjit Sajjan, who was our Minister of National Defense, and he had a lot of attacks, including a lot of concerns about India and foreign interference. Um, I think he had to ATIP, or a journalist had to ATIP his like his security, like not clearance, his security assessment to see why were they not doing anything. And they even said I had to get a panic button in my house. And then I said, okay, well, what happens when I press the panic button if it's late at night? And they're like, well, it's really monitored like during the day. I was like, oh, okay. So I got this button when I could call 911.
Unbelievable. I mean, that I think those are the type of stories that unfortunately I think make women fearful about going into politics. But I think worst case scenario would be that you didn't talk about any of this stuff because I think there's always that pressure out there to not discuss some of these things because maybe it makes you seem weak or you couldn't handle it and everybody faces these issues. But that's not actually true. I mean, we know the data is in that women face these issues much more than men do, and it's a very toxic place online for a lot of women in different positions beyond just politics as well. So it has maybe been dealt with better by the government, like you mentioned, and they're taking it more seriously. But actually, the situation online has, I think, become worse. I mean, now we have Elon Musk, who is overseeing X, and it's kind of his plaything to ensure that a lot of this harassment and organization of bots fulfills its destiny. So it's almost become more of a cesspool out there.
Well, you know this better than anyone ever. I mean, one, we engage, and then suddenly the cesspool is on us. We're like, oh, here we go. You're just actually proving the point, folks. Yeah, no, it's way worse. And it is, in a way, it's so bizarre because it's so obvious. Like, it's tech bros that are American that are, have an agenda that actually go after progressives and now have taken all the controls that were meant to stop the harassment. Like, I very naively thought when I would get attacks, like my team and I, we would report them. Like, that was hilarious. But even then, at least they had people that were responsible for, looking at these sort of, not really. But now they don't even have any protection. And it's not just like, let anyone, like, people may just say, well, okay, and that's politicians. And some people are like, you signed up for that. No, we didn't sign up for it. But even if you were to say the politicians, look what is happening to young people. It's well documented. Like, Meta actually allows abuse, and you have to be reported so many times before they do anything. And this is like baiting of young people. So I don't know, at some point we're going to have to take this seriously. Like, if we're worried about foreign interference, well, let me tell you, there's this guy, Elon Musk, who's sitting in the United States, who's committing foreign interference and is going on our phone every second of every minute of every day. And, Yeah, I don't know. Like, I know people like, they're like, not regulate freedom of speech. I go quite hard in the freedom of speech argument. I am a lawyer. And I was like, dudes, this isn't, sorry, I shouldn't say dudes. I mean, it's anyone, but often it's men. I was like, this is not freedom of speech. Like, if anything, my freedom of speech and my rights, to liberty are being impeded because I'm being personally attacked. And by the way, it's also anyone who engages with me. Like some young kid would put out something that they had a metal straw, and then they would go after this kid. And so I think we have to be tougher in how we address things and also not let people just say things like this is I blocked one of these rage farming outlets, someone who worked for them, and they were like, you have to unblock us because you're impinging our freedom of speech. I was like, go for it. Like, I'm happy to go to court and have that debate. And that's when they found out that I had lawyers. So they found out there was a violence against women in politics campaign against me organized. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And I talk about that in my book. And once again, it's just because I want change. But I think to your point, it is gendered. It is gendered. Like women get it worse. And you can talk to environment ministers after me. They will say that. They definitely got a lot of flack, but also the way you get it. Like I was called Climate Barbie. Yes, there isn't a picture of the book of one of the Barbies. Grown men would go to toy stores, buy Barbies, write a really mean note, trace down my address, and then mail this to, me at one of my various offices. We would give them to toy drives at Christmas, but I had one. And I was just thinking about like the effort people will put into doing these things. But it also goes beyond that, right? Like they would take a Barbie and, people are like, oh, Barbie, that's great. Barbie went to the moon, my kids tell me. And I was like, that is not what they're saying when they say that.
Oh,
they're like, you're a bimbo. You're only in cabinet because you're a woman. And by the way, we're going to put a little climate denial around this. And they would take a Barbie and they'd have a sledgehammer and they would crush it. And journalists would often have me on their show. And it was a little hard because I wasn't always expected. They just read tweets or read posts. Facebook was also terrible. And they just read that and you're just like listening to these things. And you're like, I'm just a regular person from Hamilton who actually wanted to go to the Olympics for swimming, didn't want to be a politician. Spoiler alert. I didn't go to the Olympics for swimming. I made Olympic trials, but it's just funny because it's so weird because I'm like, I'm just trying to do my job and I happen to be a woman and it's a really hard job. And then you have to take that on. And I know you've had to do that and women in media have to do this. And it's flipping exhausting because I don't wake up every day and say I'm a woman. I was waking up every day saying I'm trying to do this job. It's really hard. And so anyway, I hope that there are people recognize this. And I think I see some action. But the problem is some of the things here are hard. You have to take on people. It's kind of like you got to take on oil and gas if you're working on climate. You got to take on kind of like a lot of the tech bros at heart of it because they're using their own platforms to, facilitate this.
And it's fair to say, I think a lot of people, women included, don't want to do that. They don't want to have to face this. They don't want that fight in their lives. I mean, it's a lot. It's pretty overwhelming to deal with. But I think it's still true to say that even having discussions about what a lot of women face will help other people to stand up against some of this online hate that happens. I haven't talked a lot about this, but my first TV job, I was in my late 20s, and I had to be escorted from inside the studio to my car every night for a couple of months because I had a stalker. And eventually the company I was working for, which was Rogers, they disconnected the guy's internet because he was harassing me and threatening my family. This went on forever. I mean, this is my first job, right out of pretty much journalism school. And so I think we learn to live with that and maybe don't talk about it enough. Yeah. But I'm not sure that is the answer. And I think it's also important to have people to stand up for you. And I love in your book where you talk about two men, both former prime ministers, who were there for you, who were mentors for you, both Prime Minister Mulroney and Chrétien. I would love to hear a little bit about those stories because I really love those parts of the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like when you're in politics, there is this kinship, I think. And I mean, when I was first running in Ottawa Centre, someone said, well, you should really get Monsieur Chrétien to come help you. And he was amazing. He came to one of my rallies towards the end and like 400 people showed up. So we signed up all these volunteers. I'm very practical, but he was just so awesome talking about why politics mattered and we needed people like new people like me. And So we always stayed in touch, and I would go to, I'd have lunch with him, and we'd have a good laugh. And he said to me early days, he said, you know what? He said it in French. So, Catherine, les Canadiens sont raisonnables. Soyez raisonnable. So he's like, Canadians are reasonable. Be reasonable. And he didn't really think we were being reasonable, I think. And that was such awesome advice because it is so hard in politics and you got to make tough calls all the time. But his lesson that people are reasonable, they don't always have to agree with you. And I think you can think about that. Like he made very tough calls. Not going into the Iraq war was a really tough call. And it was very divisive, including in our own country. I mean, I think later on, everyone was like, that was a brilliant decision. But a lot of conservatives in particular didn't like it. But I think people respected him for standing up for what he believed in. And that's really important in politics. Like you lose the respect, that is everything. That's all you really have. So he was always great, and I could always reach out to him, and he was very supportive. Brian Mulroney was a different way. So as I'm trying to think, okay, how do I work on climate change? And I knew carbon pricing was going to be very hard. I was like, I need conservative male politicians who believe in this. And luckily, there are a lot because it's a conservative, well, progressive, I guess, conservative policy to use the market to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. And so I went to him and I just asked him for advice. I said, what should I do? And he was like, you have to price on pollution and give all the money back. And you have to go see my friend George Shultz, who was Secretary of State under Reagan. So I went to see him and he's like, you need to give all the money back. He was doing a cross-partisan I guess a cross-partisan, they only have two parties there, but where they all cared about climate and they all agreed on this method. And Brian Mulroney was so great because I'd have a hard day. Like I remember one day where David Suzuki, who I have great respect for, but he publicly called for me to resign. And I'm getting hammered on all sides, by the way. So I was like, whoa, I'm like, now I've got like, people who care about climate calling for me to resign and other people are calling for my heads, like literally. So he called me up and he said, Catherine, don't listen to the noise. You're doing the right thing. And he even said that publicly, which really mattered a lot because a lot of conservatives in particular were attacking me, and to have someone who really cared about the environment, but also wanted things done in, a smart way, he supported me. And so he was great. I mean, he really was a green prime minister. I spoke later on when he got an award from the Canadian Geographic Society. And I even did a podcast with Ben Mulroney, and people are like, what? Like, he's a conservative, whatever. And like, I'm not like, I am partisan, but I'm not partisan like that. Like, it's okay to have people across party lines that you can get along with. So he was like that. There's some other funny stories. There's a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger because I also enlisted him because I was like, well, if I can get Arnold Schwarzenegger, I can say, we need to terminate climate change, which I did. He did a video for me. He actually called me up. So you'll see a hilarious photo where he FaceTimed me saying, Catherine, how can I help you? And he shows up, like his face pops up on my screen. I'm in a very boring meeting with public servants about carbon pricing. And I grab my phone, rush to the washroom. He's smoking a cigar.
Of course.
And all I can do, now you would be fine on this, but Amber, with the technology piece, but I was like, okay, I gotta get a screenshot of this for my kids. So I was like a genius. I got the screenshot. And so that's in the book too. But I was lucky to meet people. Yeah, sure, they were quite famous. People would recognize them, but they also were willing to help. And they realized, like, I was just trying my best, and I would go to anyone for advice, like to try to figure out how do I advance climate policy in a way that helps people and brings people along. And so I was just so grateful that people were willing, including people who could, they don't have to meet with me, like former prime ministers, but were willing to take the time and provide me with their best advice or just bolster my spirits and just say, like, you just got to keep on going. And that was really important, including when I was really hard, when I was down. Like, sometimes it's hard, right? You will be down. And yeah, it was really great.
I wanted to ask you about your dad, who passed not that long ago, because I really enjoyed hearing about him and his sensibility and his stories. And, as someone from rural Prince Edward Island, he reminded me a lot of my dad, who passed just about a year ago and was such an incredible role model for me. Can you talk a little bit about him and how he helped you to stay strong during that time?
I mean, my dad was hilarious. So he was from Dublin. He was the youngest of 6 boys. Like my poor granny. And And he was hardcore. Like, he loved sports. He ended up coming to Canada, played rugby for Canada, and the life of every single party. Very demanding. Like, I had to get straight A's in school. I had to be a great swimmer, and then I could kind of like maybe go out sometimes. But he was hilarious. Like, they're just like, people would be like, this is bonkers. But he was a dentist, so people would come to the dental office and they would be at my high school, and I might not even really know them. And he'd put a picture of me, and he'd be like, "That's my daughter. She's not very attractive, not very smart, but if you take her to prom, I'll give you $100 in a limo." And they'd be like, "What is going on?" And I mean, that's just how he rolled. And like, it was kind of wacky that he would say these things, but in a way, good preparation. But he also cared so much about politics. Like, if you're Irish, and my grandfather fought for Irish independence. And so that did give me strength when I'd think, oh, this is really hard. I was like, oh, well, actually, fighting for Irish independence is really hard too. But he really believed in politics. And he was a pure Elliott Trudeau liberal. He believed in bilingualism. We all went to this French school, like not even French immersion, like at the other end of the city, on a bus because my parents both wanted me to speak good French. He's always been a liberal. And I think he was pretty thrilled when I said I was going to go into politics. I mean, my mom was like, that is a terrible idea. This is the worst idea I've ever heard. You've got kids, you're going to get hate. And I think she'd seen Sheila Copps, who's from Hamilton, who really took it hard being a woman in politics. She had a daughter. But my dad, I don't know, he was the best. Like, the thing that makes me kind of sad is like when I go to events, like, he loved every event. Like, we would have a party and whatever it was, say after an election win, and he'd be there and he'd be the last, and he'd be like, do we have to go yet? Like, he's still shaking hands.
I love that.
It was great. But he also knew how to have a good time, and I try to talk about that in the book, right? Like, hard things are hard, and working on climate or human rights or democracy, or for you, like, tech, and trying to figure out how to move forward in a way that protects people, it's really hard. And so he would always say, like, go have fun with your friends or with your family. And that was really important because, you can't just live life and it's really hard. Like, I'm laughing, I'm wearing a shirt. People might be wondering if they can see me that I'm wearing a shirt that has Alyssa P on it. So Alyssa P is an Inuk artist. I went to see her. She was playing the Danforth Music Hall. Very excited to be moving into Toronto. So much goes on here. I love Ottawa, but less goes on in Ottawa. And we just had a fun time dancing, and so I think he really had joie de vivre, like, and he also loved swimming, so that's where I got it. And my mom was also awesome too. Like, I talk about this a bit, and I don't know if you can relate, Amber, or other women. I'm older than you, but other women might be able to relate because I didn't really understand. My mom had been a nurse, and then she had kids and didn't work anymore, and I didn't really get it. I was like, no, you've got to like be working. Meanwhile, all she did was work. She had 4 kids, and my dad was not around all the time. And so, I learned a lot from her about, like, when you have kids, how your priorities can kind of change. I mean, I still wanted to make difference, but I was like, I'm not going to spend time in corporate law, which I hate, just to make a buck. I'm going to figure out how to run a charity, which I don't know how we're going to have money, like, after a year. And she was good like that because she's like, prioritize what is important, and for her and for me is family. And so,
Yeah, I certainly have that experience. When I think about my mom and that generation of moms, it's fair to say they sacrificed so much for us. And of course, generations before that. I mean, no one ever said to my mom, like, you should take a break. You should do some self-care. That was not part of their
that was definitely, there was no time for self-care.
There's no time for any of that. And so a lot of these women really, devoted their lives to their families and supporting their husbands. And so I think they took a lot so we could stand up and have those careers and be able to really shine. So I have a huge respect. I wanted to end our conversation talking a little bit about climate because there was a quote in your book, and you kind of alluded to this, that says, climate change denial and misogyny go hand in hand. I think this is fair to say. I find this in tech as well for some conversations. There's this phrase out there, Scott Galloway, who's a podcaster, talks about, which is the tech bros want you to believe that there's this sort of complexity to technology. Like, no one understands it but them. It's like an illusion of complexity. I feel this a little bit in climate climate. And I would also say that even though you have faced so much, you continue to work in the climate space. So tell me a little bit about what type of work you're doing today, and what you hope happens, here in Canada on the climate front.
Yeah, I mean, when I left politics, it was funny. There's a picture of me. I just like rode off on my bicycle over this footbridge that we built with the community. And I think people, like, I literally got journalists, they were saying, well, if you really cared about climate change, you'd stay in politics. And I was like, that was the weirdest thing anyone's ever said. Like, there are many ways to tackle climate change because it's an everything issue. So we have to be doing everything. So I left. I decided I'm quite entrepreneurial, and I was like, being bossed around when you're in politics, you are bossed around, including by the prime minister's office. I was like, I'm just gonna set up my own company, and I'm only gonna work on climate with people that I think are doing the work, and on scale. It was really important to me. We gotta scale our solutions. And it's largely global work, so that was great. And I really like the freedom of having my own business. It's really, it's really exciting. It was a bit like when we started this charity. It was, freedom to try to figure out what you're doing. It's really hard, but it was awesome. And then the UN Secretary General asked me to lead a high level expert group looking at when companies and financial institutions and cities and regions say we're going to be net zero by 2050. Like, how does that mean something? Because 2050 is so far out, you could just say it and do nothing, which actually happens a fair bit, and that's greenwashing. So we did a report. We were very clear on what you need to do and what is greenwashing. And I do a number of other things. I was with Columbia University. I'll probably be doing more with the University of Toronto. So I do, and I'm on some boards. But so I'm doing things I love, but I will always continue to work on climate. And to your point on complexity, I think that that's what happens in the case of climate. It's actually oil and gas, so it's kind of ironic because you're like, oh, we're in a fossil fuel climate crisis, but here are oil and gas telling us they are the solution, right? And so then people get, I think rightly we all get like, oh, maybe they are. I was fooled because I was like, oh, I'm going to sit with these oil and gas companies and we're going to work on climate and they're going to do their part, and they didn't. Like, they said, they agreed with the government of Rachel Notley. You had like oil and gas executives on the stage saying, we want a cap on emissions. We want a price on pollution. We want tough methane regs. And yes, we ended up getting a pipeline because the Notley government, they said we need to also get our resources market. That was a really tough pill for me. But I was like, okay, you got to make compromises to get climate action. Well, guess what happened? They then lobbied against every single policy. Now we have a Premier Danielle Smith who doesn't care at all about climate action. And they've been able to walk everything back. And we're now in this space again where we're like, well, we should get them another pipeline. Like, if my kids did that, I'm sorry, like, you have to do things and then you don't get like a nice candy for doing nothing. And so I think that's the thing that is really hard because you have entrenched interests, much like in the tech industry. And they want to diminish people that are working in climate, like you're naive.
Yeah, I think we see that all the time, right? And I think that's where that kind of, hey, leave it to us, right? We can figure this out. I mean, you see that in tech all the time, like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, they come out with these announcements about what they're going to do on the safety side. Yet at the same time, and we talk about this on this episode of the podcast, Meta has had a policy in place in terms of sex trafficking that it will take 17 cases of someone complaining about sex trafficking for them to do anything, because you can do up to 16 things when it comes to sex trafficking.
That's okay.
And that's okay. They won't bother the person who is the one perpetrating that. So these are not the right people to turn to in these times of crisis.
I mean, that's the challenge, right? Like, they're smart, clearly. They've made tons of money, and I would say oil and gas maybe less smart. They just have been like, filling, stuff out of the ground that's super polluting. And we didn't know that initially. We now are very clear that we're in a fossil fuel climate crisis. And they have a lot of power. And power dynamics, you say that playing out in these different spaces. And they can amplify their message. And so it's really hard. And that's why I will continue working on climate change and try to talk like a real person and just emphasize, like, I don't care how you tackle climate change. Like, your emissions just have to go down, your real emissions. Like, there's just a test there. I'm getting so excited. I'm gonna like fall off my chair here. But there's like a real test you can see, are your emissions going down? Is the money going to renewable energy versus fossil fuels? And are you doing it in a way that life is more affordable? Because we can save people a lot of money. Like, we got everyone a heat pump, especially low-income Canadians, as opposed to subsidizing massively profitable US-owned companies where they give their money not to clean, they go and give it back to shareholders or new production. Like, we could do good things, and I think it is important. And in my book, I talk about doing pinky promises. So I met so many kids. They were so awesome. Like, whenever I had a crappy day, my team would give me a letter from some kid that was trying to bolster my spirits. I have one of them from, a Girl Guide who wrote me a lovely note. But there were so many, and young people would come up to me and say, like, I'm doing this. I've got, a metal straw, or I'm doing a garbage pickup, a plastic pickup at the beach, or we're doing a recycling drive at our school, whatever it is. And I would say, okay, that's amazing. Let's do a pinky promise or a pinky swear that we will continue acting on climate. And so I'm out of politics. So I love the people of Ottawa Center. I love Canadians, but I don't know anything to them now. I'm not elected, but I owe something to those kids. And those kids are still working hard on climate, and they've only known the climate crisis. And unfortunately, adults with power aren't doing enough. And that is just the reality. It is the reality here. It's the reality around the world. And there aren't excuses. Like, it's just a science problem. It doesn't care if you did a deal or, whatever. It's literally, are your emissions going down aligned with the science? And so I'm just going to keep on pushing. I'm one person, but I think it's also about how do you empower others? And people say, would you get back into politics? Like, I don't want to get back into politics. I want to help other people that go into politics, women, but broader diversity, maybe like way more diversity in politics. And I want to help young people and women. Women are 2.5 times more likely to work on climate. They're 2.5 more times more likely to push climate action. And if you have women on a board, they're more likely to disclose their emissions. So that's a theory of change. So anyway, Amber, I'm not giving up. I just keep on going. It's the swimmer in me. It's like a long-term stretch goal, and we just keep on going. So I hope you continue going and continue speaking up, because we're on the side of right. And eventually that will win. It's just really hard some days.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Before we go, just a reminder that you can watch our interview segments, our headlines, and the other Mac segments over at youtube.com/AmberMac. Our subscriber numbers are growing, and we really appreciate your support there. And make sure when you get there, like and subscribe and comment. It helps the show.
Yes, please do that. Now, I just wrapped up an event focusing on democracy in the workplace. It was a fascinating conversation with some of today's top business leaders who are working to guide their teams through this age of disinformation and growing democratic disengagement. These are all real challenges that exist. A part of that conversation will be coming up in a future episode. And please remember that if you have any questions or comments on today's show, you can find us on social media at AmberMac and at Jeff MacArthur. Thanks for listening and have a great week.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.